I'd like to welcome everyone to this edition of the Nurses Station. And I'm really pleased to tell you that we have with us Dr. Trudy Gaillard. And Dr. Gaillard is a health disparities subject matter expert whose research has informed the science of aging and health equity by expanding the knowledge of aging, minority health, and management of conditions that disproportionately affect minorities, such as diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and cognitive impairment. So we're very happy to have you with us, Dr. Gaillard.
Thank you. How are you?
Doing well, doing well. And you're in a beautiful, warm state of Florida, so we feel a
Uh,
little jealous, but
yes, yes. I'm
you're making it.
faculty at Florida International University, a tenure professor, and I just got a chair's position. So I'm the chair for the Dr. Vanessa Von Wertheim Chair of Chronic Disease Prevention and Care. I'm excited about that. And I'll be doing a presentation on next Thursday. I'll send you the Zoom link in case any of your students want to join that.
Please
Just
do.
to talk about some of my
That is
research as well
amazing.
as my current research in aging and health disparities.
Oh, congratulations. What an
Thank
honor
you.
and well deserved with all the work that you've done. I tell you, when I was looking, because I usually do, I try not to go too deep into everybody's story because I love to hear the story from the person. But I was telling Andy, I was like, woo, when I printed her CV off, I was like, wow, this is a lot of a lot of research that she's done. So what an amazing body of work you have. But I'm gonna take a step back for just a second and ask you to tell us, how did you get to be a nurse, Dr. Gaillard? What is the story of how you came into the nursing profession?
So every story starts with the beginning.
Mhm.
And I guess in high school, when my mom was saying, "What do you want to be?" And I said, "Well, I think I want to be a nurse." So she suggested that I volunteer as a candy striper. So that junior year, senior year, before going to college, I volunteered at our local hospital as a candy striper. And for all of you nursing students, I'll let you know that at first, I would come home a lot just telling my mom a lot of stories and crying. "Oh my God, I saw blood today. Oh my God, they put me in the emergency room and this person came in not breathing." And, all these things that you see as a young nurse and you go, or as a young student,
Mhm.
you say, "Oh my God, can I really do this?" But I think what it taught me was that, nurses have to have compassion, they have to be good
Mhm.
listeners, and they really have to love what they do. So those are the things that as I began my nursing career that I kept in the back of my head. I'm going to love this even though I don't love seeing blood, and even though I don't love the emergency aspects of nursing. There are other things about nursing that you can do, and the field of nursing is so broad that I must really say that I've enjoyed my career as a nurse. Um, in college, I went to Rutgers State University of New Jersey, and I had a lot of great nurses there. Back in the 80s, a lot of the nurses that were my professors were military nurses. So they were strict. I mean, if your
Oh.
uniform wasn't white, if your shoes were not white, they sent you home. And I remember wanting to change my uniform a little bit, and I bought a pair of pants that had all these pockets. And my professor said, "Trudy, you go home and put on our nursing uniform. That is not nursing." So those were
Mm.
all the funny things that I remember. It's like, no, you cannot dress up this uniform. It's standard. You have to wear exactly what we do.
Exactly.
But as a student nurse going to med surge, I kind of like that a lot more. I didn't care for peds because I was on an oncology unit. And to see little kids having lymphoma and brain tumor, it just hurt my heart too
Mm.
much. I really couldn't take it. So I decided that med surge was more adults. I can talk to them. They can tell me what their needs were, and I can relate to them a lot better. So after completing my BSN, I worked for a while and got to experience and try to connect the dots. So I'll tell all of you young students that the things that you learn now, they will all come together. You know, we're giving you a lot of skills, a lot of education. You may not understand it all now, but they all go together. It's important that you understand pathophysiology. It's important that you understand what health conditions are, to look at small little cues that might alert you that something is going on with your patient. And all of it will come together as you start to work. And I teach fundamentals in med surg now in our undergraduate school at Florida International University. And I keep reminding my students, it's all going to come together. Just relax. Right now, we're giving you things to help boost your confidence. So I want you to pretend that you know it, because you do. And your goal is to try to make your client, your patient, feel comfortable. You can't come in as a bag of nerves. You just can't do that. But remember the patient's condition, explain it to them in simple terms, and then explain to them what you're going to do. You're helping both of you feel comfortable with whatever crisis or experience that student is going through now. So that's how we approach it. And we're ending our semester now. And they're like, Dr. Gaillard, it wasn't so bad. Thank you. You made me feel good. I'm like, yeah, you'll feel good. Just take it easy. I don't want you to be cocky, but talk. Be calm. And if you don't know, say you don't know. I'll go back and ask my instructor. It's okay. Yeah. So,
Well, Dr. Gaillard, I wish I had you. I wish I'd had you in nursing school, because that calming presence and all of that, calm down. In general, nursing school is like, the
well, it
entire
is,
time.
it is, well, because it's something unfamiliar with you, right? And we all want to do good, and we all want
Right.
to have a good impression. But nobody is expecting that you know everything, but we're expecting that you have some basic knowledge. You're the novice nurse. As you begin your skills and feel comfortable, you feel more comfortable with what you're doing.
That's good. Well, you're the gatekeeper, and that's a good person to have as the gatekeeper, because when they're coming in, if they can get met with that calm presence but reassuring presence, that's going to carry them a long way,
Right.
And as I think back, my fundamentals instructor had that same spirit. So I'm glad that that's where they're getting the entry point, because it's a lot to take in. It's a lot to take in. So now, how did you get into research? Because I have to tell you that when I started out in nursing, first of all, I did what every nurse said. I'm gonna get this associate's degree and I'm not going back to school, is what I said. And then, of course, a couple years down the road, I was like, well, I want to be able to work in the health department, got to have the BSN. I'm gonna get this BSN and I'm not doing nothing else. That's it. I'm not going back to school. And then I said, well, I want to do a little more in the community. If I had gotten to this patient before, I might have been able to do more. Maybe I'll go back to nurse practitioner school. And then I'm not doing any more school. And now I'm in a doctoral program. So, but I'm interested to know, how did you get from working in bedside into the research aspect?
Well, that's a great question. And just like you, it's always about, okay, I've done this for so long. I want to do something new. So as you want to do something new, you kind of say, I need more education, or I want to learn my skills a little bit better. So initially I worked in med surg, and then one of my friends was doing a hypertension awareness program in the community. And I enjoyed it. So we went to churches and I helped her in the health clinic, just doing education about what is high blood pressure because of the higher rates of hypertension in the Black community. So I talked to her, I said, I really like that. So she said, you should go back and get a degree in community health. So then I did something in community health. Then I became diabetic. from having a strong family history of diabetes. And then I changed my focus. I said, everybody that gets diabetes is not because they're fat. I wasn't fat at that time. It's not because they eat too much. I was going to the gym and exercising, so there's something different.
Mhm.
So one thing that I was always a strong advocate was attending conferences that kind of gave me different viewpoints than what I got from my community. So I was attending a conference at the American Diabetes Association, and I met a doctor there, Dr. Kwame Oze, and he was presenting about ethnic differences and how people of African ancestry develop diabetes. So he was looking at African Americans in the United States, in Ghana, in Nigeria, in Cameroon, as well as Africans that were living in the UK. And he was looking at glucose metabolism, insulin sensitivity, and ways to measure those things as being precursors to how people develop diabetes. And I was just intrigued because there was terms that I'd never heard of. It was more than just what's your glucose level. It's other things that really have to go, that are related to how your body metabolizes the glucose. So after that conference, or after his presentation, I said, I want to learn more about what you do. He said, really? So he invited me to dinner, not knowing that he was having his colleagues kind of evaluate me to see if I would be a good person for his research. So he offered me a job at The Ohio State University.
Wow.
And that is where I got exposed to how do we look at different measures that look at risk factors for diabetes. So we know glucose, we know obesity, we know poor diets are all risk factors, but there are also things that are related to how your body metabolizes glucose, how your body handles insulin, and then what are the mechanisms or that trigger that really leads to you really developing diabetes. So that was my introduction. And what Dr. Oze encouraged me to do was read the literature, look at what they're saying globally, and then see how that applies to the people that you're coming in contact with. So he invited me to look at some data, to ask simple questions. So at that time, we were looking at economic status and how does economics relate to precursors or development of diabetes. And what I saw in my population, that your income really didn't matter. What really mattered was your family history and the point at which you developed or started to gain weight. So one of the things we talked about, for people of color, simple weight gain, 20 pounds is a lot. And it puts your body in a different state of metabolism that increases your risk for diabetes. So one of the things that we talked a lot about is how does lifestyle, stress, exercise, nutrition, how do all of those things kind of put into a risk factor pool? And we started looking at simple risk factor things. We had a term called metabolic syndrome or syndrome X, which is a constellation of risk factors that have to do with waist circumference. Simple measures. If you're a woman and your waist circumference is greater than 35 inches, that's a risk factor. If you're a man and your waist circumference is greater than 40 inches, that's a risk factor. What about blood pressure? Well, if you have hypertension, that's also a risk factor. If you have abnormalities in lipids and lipoproteins, triglycerides, HDL cholesterol, and then the final risk factor was elevated glucose. So if you look at those risk factors and you have 3 or more of those risk factors, that puts you at risk for developing diabetes. Then if you add on that family history, that's another risk factor. If you add on top of that gestational diabetes for women, that's another risk factor. So each person has to look at their risk, and you're giving some standard numbers, and you can see where you fall in that risk factor pool, and then start working on lowering those risk factors.
Wow, that is so amazing. I have to tell you, you hitting right home because, my husband's a diabetic, my mother's a
Uh-uh.
diabetic. I have grandparents who were diabetics. His parents ended up renal failure on dialysis because of diabetes. I have grandparents that were amputees. In fact, how my mother knew I was going to be a nurse is that my grandmother had her leg amputated, and she said I was the only one of the grandchildren who was not afraid of her and would go in and bathe her stump and do all the things that she needed to do and prick her finger to eat when I was a little girl. And so
Wow.
diabetes was kind of the beginning of me wanting to take care of people and be a nurse. But now your research is so valuable because there are so many risk, factors. I've been pre-diabetic in the past, which I understand is really almost diabetic for some, on some levels, on some cellular
Yes.
levels, really, even though the
Yes.
numbers might not say it,
Right.
you know.
Right. Yes. And
So this is so much valuable research.
yes, and pre-diabetes just means that your blood sugars are approaching higher levels, and we've changed those standards. When I was in nursing school, if your blood sugar was greater than 200, then we treated you. Now, if your
Mhm.
blood sugar fasting is greater than 126, we treat you, and we consider that pre-diabetic. And we have better tools now. We have the hemoglobin A1C. We want that number to be less than 6. Pre-diabetic is 5.6 to 6.4. So we've changed the standards so that we can identify people at risk and tell them to start lowering their risk factors. The two best ways is physical activity
Exactly.
and changes in your diet, more fruits and vegetables, or a healthy Mediterranean diet. And yesterday I read a study that said that that people that do at least 8 minutes of vigorous activity a day lower their risk factors for diabetes and cardiovascular disease. So we're all busy. So just think about it. If you can run real vigorously for 8 minutes, you're lowering your risk. Before, we said 150 minutes of exercise a day, moderate activity. That's like 30 minutes a day.
Mhm.
Some people have a hard time getting 30 minutes. So now give yourself a real power workout for 8 minutes, and you're
Mhm.
still lowering your risk. So we have to look
And
at
that
all these different ways to lower risk factors and look at how we can add those into our daily lives to make our overall life better.
Yeah, in 8 minutes, I'm telling you, if we can take these cell phones and look at screen time, we spend a whole lot more than 8 minutes on the on the phone.
Exactly. That's my
So
point. 8
that's
minutes, but it
something.
has to be vigorous. So you have to
Right.
sweat, So
Exactly.
if you can get 8 minutes in, sweat it up, and then go back to your cell phone if that's what you like to do.
Oh my goodness. Well, it's clear to see that this research is a passionate driving force for you. So that is really good because when you can do something that's a passion for you, it really makes a difference. And
Yeah.
I can certainly see that in just talking to you. I want to ask as well, because we've been asking almost everybody we've talked to in the past couple of years, what kind of a shift you've seen in nursing as a whole from your vantage point since COVID has happened. We could never have imagined, what COVID became. I know I didn't. And we've seen a shift from our side, education wise, with the nurse practitioner programs. Of course, we have difficulty with preceptorships. Are there shifts or changes that you've seen from your vantage point that it would be valuable to even share with those who are in school now?
Well, I would encourage you that there's always a need for nurses. I think the shift is that more universities are looking for ways to accommodate without lowering standards. So what do I mean by that? They understand that there's some people that are second degrees. So we're offering night courses. When you and I went to school, everything was during the day.
Mhm.
Sometimes we have clinicals on weekends as well as evening clinical starting at 3 p.m. That never happened when I was in nursing school, but it's to accommodate people that are young, that might have families
Mhm.
and childcare issues. Always remember that healthcare is always needed. There will always be a need for nurses, and there's always a need in a variety of areas. So as you begin to, explore what you like, always remember that there's always something to do. We have nurses that work in hospitals. We have the DNP program is really popular because we have a need for more primary care providers. And we have a need for those people to be beyond the cities and the major institutions. You spoke of health departments. We need nurses in rural areas. And now my new passion is seniors. What care do seniors need? How can we make sure that their quality of life is as well as the services that they need are provided for them in a variety of settings? So providing healthcare not only in the home and senior community centers, as well as we have a lot of faith-based healthcare small clinics that see people in areas that are familiar with them, as well as providing care in places that are safe and secure. There's also a increase in care for the homeless. We're having a rise of people that are facing homelessness, whether they can afford to pay for their current living conditions. And we're also having an increase in homelessness among our seniors. And that is really something that we should be concerned about. So I would encourage you all to just continue to strive. The things that your professors are telling you now, the light bulb will go off and it'll click. And when it clicks, you'll say, oh, that's what she was talking about or he was talking about. So just keep on striving, study hard. It's important.
Yes, you're right.
Yes, Ms. Brown.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yes, you're right. In everything you've said about nursing, there's so much work to be done and so many different types of things to do. So, the hospital is a place to begin, but the community is becoming more and more the site where we have to meet people, we know where they are. And being that I'm in my 50s, so I'm kind of like the kids are raised a little bit. And now I have the parents that are in their 70s. And I was just telling my husband yesterday, I'm gonna have to start getting with them on some of this healthcare stuff because sometimes they can be a little non-compliant, and so that's a challenge as well. So I probably need to look at some of your research on how to manage seniors and on cognitive issues and all those things, because it's not always that we think we can deal with the fact when they lose cognitive ability, but what about when they are perfectly cognizant, but they do not want to comply? That's another
Right.
thing. So definitely so many areas that we can learn from each other. So with the work that you're doing now there, and I know that you're in an awesome place, but you're like me in a lot of ways in that we get in this spot, but we always have our eye on something else that we want to do when circumstances allow it. So what is that goal that's just beyond your reach, but in your sights right now, Dr. Gaillard?
Yeah. So since moving to Florida, I moved here from Ohio, which is a different area. And I moved to a state that has a higher population of seniors. So
Yes.
what I realized is that education is important, but it's also important that it's done in a level that's understandable as well as respect. Because remember, if the seniors are like my parents, they check you when you're out of tune,
Oh
right?
yes, absolutely. I have a Southern African American mother, so let me just tell you, no.
Yeah. So everything has to be done gently. And what I've started to do was having these healthy conversations with seniors and getting them to talk about, what is it that you like? What is it that you don't like? How can I, as a researcher, help to bridge the gap and some of the things that you feel that you don't have a better understanding of? Right now, we're working on building a website that's just having simple educational messages. One of the things that my seniors tell me is that as a researcher, all the time, I don't do a good job making sure the message resonates with them. So I need to be clear.
Hmm.
I need whatever I'm talking about to have pictures and images of people that look like them. So what we forget about is that people want to see a connection in what you're doing and see something that they can also relate to. So I have to keep that in the back of my mind. The other thing is we are very oral society. So they want people to share stories, but not sad stories. They want stories of how people have overcome, how they've dealt with the challenges, but they've been successful. So in other words, they want to have this healthy wellness attitude, even about the chronic diseases that they have. So that's my whole focus now, is to change the message. Yes, you need to take care of your diabetes. These are the things you need to be mindful of. But now here's a story of somebody that looks just like you that has overcome the challenges. So in other words, I'm not being guilty, or putting a guilt trip on them. I'm giving them messages that resonate with them, but also giving them, this is how this person has dealt with what you're currently dealing with. So I want to produce this website that just has different stories about diabetes, different stories about how people have made dietary changes, and different stories about seniors that are 90 that still get up every morning and do their 30-minute walk. So those kind of things. So it's just going to be this educational piece, but now here's a piece of a person telling a story. And I think that's what they tell me they want. So we'll
That
see.
is, and I cannot tell you how much I love that, because I am a storyteller. I'm a person that always sat at the feet of the elders and gleaned the stories from them. And that just was a light bulb moment for me, because the positive, because we try to lead with the negative. If you don't take care of your diabetes, you're going to end up here, you're going to do whatever. But the positive, that is just so amazing. We are so very privileged as a profession, as a people, as humanity, to have someone like you that has that vision. And when you get that website, we definitely want to get that address so that we can share it with everyone, and we'll be able to see the good work that you're doing. And we also want you to share your presentation information, because we definitely want students to make sure they're part of that, because this conversation has been completely wonderful.